Hey, my name is Marcus Davis. I'm 32 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. I run a small consulting firm called Davis Strategic Consulting. It's not a big company, but it's steady. I have my own office, a few employees, and clients who keep coming back. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed this life was possible for someone like me. I didn't grow up with any of this. There was a stretch of time when I slept in my car. I washed dishes 12 hours a day in a small restaurant kitchen, standing on floors that were always wet and slippery. I learned to count every single dollar to buy the cheapest bread at the end of my shift, to pretend I wasn't hungry when I was. I knew what it felt like to be invisible and still try to stand straight because pride was sometimes the only thing I had left. The person who pulled me out of that place was George Miller. He owned the little restaurant where I begged for a job when I had nothing. George didn't hand me money or treat me like I was broken. He gave me work, paid me fairly, and taught me how to look people in the eye again. On the day I left to start my first office job, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Marcus, if you ever get the chance to help someone, don't make them feel smaller than you. Just open the door. Let them walk through on their own." I've never forgotten those words. One Saturday afternoon, I went to Riverside Bistro for a quick lunch. It's a family-style place near the river, nothing fancy. I ordered chicken tenders and fries, something simple I still liked from the days when that was all I could afford. The food came out hot and crispy, and I was halfway through the plate when they walked in. A woman in a faded blue dress came through the door first. Her brown hair was tied back low, and her face looked tired but careful, like she was working hard to keep everything together. Next to her was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with messy blonde curls and one small hand gripping the side of her mother's dress. They didn't look around like people on a day out. They looked like they were trying not to be noticed. I watched the woman study the menu. She wasn't choosing. She was calculating. Her eyes moved straight to the prices before she even read the descriptions. When the server came over, she spoke quietly, almost too quietly for me to hear. The server leaned in and said something about tax, or that the kids' menu discount no longer applied. I saw the woman's shoulders tighten. She opened her wallet. There were only a few small bills and some coins inside. The little girl wasn't looking at the menu anymore. She was looking at my plate, not with curiosity or greed, just quiet, steady hunger. The kind of look that comes from a child who has already learned not to ask for too much. Something pulled tight in my chest. I remembered standing outside a bakery in Seattle years ago, staring at the bread behind the glass and telling myself, I could last one more day if I just didn't think about it. The woman said something to her daughter. The girl nodded, but her eyes stayed on the food. Then the mother stood up. She took her daughter's hand and turned toward the door. No scene, no explanation, no asking anyone for anything. She was simply leaving. I pushed my chair back and stood up before I even decided what I was going to do. I walked fast, caught up with them just outside the restaurant, and said, "Excuse me, could you wait a second?" The woman turned around immediately. Her eyes were sharp and guarded. It wasn't the look of someone proud. It was the look of someone who had been hurt before by people who said they only wanted to help. "I noticed you didn't get to order," I said, keeping my voice low. "If you don't mind, you and your daughter can sit at my table. I ordered too much." She shook her head right away. "No, thank you. We're fine. I'm not trying to offend you." Her voice got harder. "I already told you, we're fine. I don't take charity." I didn't push. I just nodded once. "I understand. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." She didn't answer. She simply turned, took her daughter's hand again, and walked away down the sidewalk. The little girl looked back once over her shoulder, her eyes still on the restaurant. I stood there for a long moment after they were gone. The afternoon light felt too bright. I went back inside, sat down in front of my half-eaten food, and didn't touch it again. I had money. I could have ordered 10 more plates without thinking twice. I could have run after them and put cash in her hand. But I knew that kind of help often wasn't help at all. For someone who had been pushed around by life, kindness offered the wrong way could feel like another trap. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone else had gone home. I kept thinking about George's words. Just open the door, let them walk through. I didn't know the woman's name, I didn't know her story, but I knew one thing for certain. She didn't need a stranger buying her a meal so she could feel small. She needed a chance that felt safe, clear, respectful. And if I was going to be the one to offer that chance, I was going to have to learn how to be patient. Nearly a week later, I saw them again at Riverside Park. It was a weekday afternoon, the kind of quiet October day when the leaves had started turning, but the air still held a little warmth. Emma was on the swings, her small legs pumping with effort. Sarah sat on a bench nearby, her body angled so she could watch her daughter without ever fully relaxing. She didn't have a phone in her hand. She wasn't scrolling or texting. Every part of her looked like she was standing guard. I chose a bench farther down the path, far enough that it wouldn't feel like I was watching them. I opened a book and kept my eyes on the pages. I didn't want her to think I had come here looking for her, even though part of me had. She noticed me within the first few minutes. I saw her back straighten. One hand moved to rest on the strap of her bag like she was already preparing to leave if I stood up. I stayed seated. I turned a page I hadn't really read and let her decide whether I was a threat. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept coming to the park when I could. Some days I only walked through, other days I sat and read. I never approached them, I never waved. I made sure there was always distance between us. Slowly, the space shrank on its own. One day I sat 2 benches away. Another day, only one. On a Thursday afternoon in the middle of October, we ended up on the same long bench. She was at the far end. I was at the other. Emma played a few yards in front of us with a small plastic shovel and a bucket of dry leaves. Neither Sarah nor I spoke. The silence stretched for almost half an hour. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't completely hostile either. It just existed between us. Then Emma came running over. "Mama, that's the man from the restaurant, right?" Sarah's voice was immediate and firm. "Emma, don't bother people." I closed my book and smiled at the girl. "Hi, Emma. My name is Marcus." She looked straight at me with the kind of honesty only children still have. "Do you still eat chicken tenders?" I laughed before I could stop myself. "I do, but I didn't bring any today." Emma smiled. Sarah reached out and gently pulled her daughter closer, not roughly, just protectively. Then she looked at me. "I appreciate that you haven't pushed," she said. Her voice was quiet but very clear. "But I need to be honest with you. I don't accept help from strangers." I nodded. "I understand." "No," she said. "You don't." She glanced at Emma, then back at me, like she was measuring whether she should continue. After a moment, she did. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. This is my daughter, Emma. 2 years ago, her father left. I had been staying home with her, so I didn't have recent work experience or references. I applied everywhere. No one wanted to hire a single mother with a gap in her resume." She paused and smoothed Emma's hair with one hand. "Then I met a man named Richard Hale. He owned a few small businesses. He gave me a job with good pay and flexible hours. I thought I had finally found someone decent." Her voice flattened. "At first it was fine. Then he started asking for more, staying late, having dinner with clients, wearing the clothes he picked, smiling more. Every time I hesitated, he reminded me that I owed him, that no one else was willing to hire me. That I should be grateful." Emma moved closer to her mother's side. "When I finally said no," Sarah continued, "he told me I didn't understand how the world worked. He said if I wanted to keep the job, I had to show my gratitude the right way." I stayed quiet. I didn't interrupt. I let her say it the way she needed to. "I quit that same day," she said, "but Richard had connections. He called the places I applied to after that, told them I couldn't be trusted, that I stole money, that I used men to get ahead. I lost the apartment. We stayed in a shelter for 4 months. Eventually, I found work doing laundry for cash. The pay is low and there's no security, but at least I don't owe anyone." She looked at me then. Her eyes were red at the edges, but her voice stayed steady. So when you offered to help at the restaurant, when you kept showing up here, I kept waiting for you to name the real price. Because I've learned that nothing is free. Sooner or later, there's always a bill. The words sat heavy between us. I didn't rush to tell her I was different from Richard. I knew men like him said the same thing. Instead, I said, "Thank you for telling me." Sarah looked surprised. I went on, "I'm not going to stand here and say I'm not like him. That would just be words. Words are cheap." Something in her expression shifted very slightly. I told her about George, about sleeping in my car and washing dishes and being afraid of everything. I told her how George had given me work without making me feel like I owed him my dignity. Then I took out one of my business cards and placed it on the bench between us instead of handing it to her. "I need an administrative assistant," I said. "Scheduling, emails, preparing client materials, organizing files. This isn't charity, it's a real job. There will be an interview, a contract, a probation period, a clear salary." Sarah didn't reach for the card. "I'm not asking you to answer right now," I said. "If you want to interview, call the office. If you don't, that's fine too. I'll still come to the park when I can. Emma can still play on the swings." She stared at the card for a long time. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because George opened a door for me once. Now it's my turn to open one. Whether you walk through it is up to you." I stood up. "It was good to meet you properly, Sarah. And Emma, your swing technique is impressive." Emma grinned. Sarah didn't smile, but the sharpness in her eyes had softened just a little. 3 days passed with no call. On the fourth day, the office phone rang. When I picked it up, Sarah's voice came through, careful and formal. "Mr. Davis, this is Sarah Mitchell. If the position is still open, I would like to interview." I sat up straighter. "It's still open. Would Monday at 9 work for you?" "Yes." On Monday, she arrived 15 minutes early. She wore a dress that had been ironed carefully and carried a resume printed on slightly yellowed paper. I interviewed her the same way I would have interviewed anyone else. I asked about her organizational skills. She answered clearly. I asked how she handled pressure. She said she was used to managing multiple things at once. When I asked about the gap in her work history, she didn't avoid it. She simply said she had been caring for her daughter and then faced some difficult circumstances. She didn't have impressive degrees, but she was sharp and careful and clearly capable of learning fast. At the end of the interview, I said, "I'd like to offer you the job." She stayed very still. I slid the contract across the desk. 3 months probation, same as any new employee. Market rate salary, benefits after you're permanent. Take the contract home. Read it carefully. Have someone look it over if you want. You don't have to sign today. Sarah picked up the papers and read through them quickly. "It's fair," she said. "It should be. You're not worried I won't do the work well?" "I'll expect good work. If you don't meet the standard, I'll tell you. If you do, you'll be paid accordingly. This is a job, not a favor." For the first time since I'd met her, Sarah smiled. It was small, but it was real. "Then I accept." I nodded. "Welcome to Davis Strategic Consulting." I didn't know it then, but the day Sarah walked into my office didn't just change her life. It also changed the way I understood what it meant to help someone without taking anything from them in return. Sarah started the following week. I treated her exactly like any other employee. I didn't ask about her personal life unless it was necessary for work. I didn't give her special treatment or call her after hours for anything that wasn't strictly business. When she made a mistake, I corrected it calmly. When she did something well, I acknowledged it the same way I would with anyone else. The first few days, she was extremely tense. Every time I called her into my office, she walked in like she was bracing for bad news. Every time I gave feedback, she apologized immediately, even for small things. When I told her, "It's fine, just fix it," she looked at me like she wasn't used to mistakes being treated as something that could simply be corrected. But she began to settle. In her second week, she suggested a better way to schedule meetings so clients in different time zones wouldn't overlap. In the third week, she caught an error in a contract before I signed it. In the fourth week, she reviewed our software subscriptions and found several we no longer needed, saving the company money without being asked. I realized I had almost passed on a genuinely capable person simply because her past looked messy on paper. One evening, when the rest of the office had already gone home, I noticed Sarah was still at her desk finishing a client file. I stood in her doorway. "You can leave that for tomorrow." She looked up. "I know, but I'd rather finish it now while it's fresh." I nodded. "Don't overwork yourself." She studied me for a moment. "You really will tell me if I'm not doing the job well, right?" "Of course. And you won't use the fact that you gave me this job to make me accept anything I don't want?" I understood why she asked. I answered directly. "No, this is work. The contract protects both of us. If you ever want to leave, you follow the notice period. If I ever need to end the position, I follow the same rules. No one owns anyone here." Sarah looked down at her desk. "It sounds simple when you say it, but not everyone does it." She nodded. "True." 6 weeks after she started, the real test came. It was around 8 o'clock at night when my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I assumed it was something work-related, but when I answered, her voice was panicked. "Mr. Davis, I'm sorry for calling so late. Emma has a high fever. She's having trouble breathing. I'm taking her to the ER right now, but tomorrow morning I have to prepare files for the client meeting. I know I'm still on probation. I know I shouldn't ask for time off so suddenly, but Sarah," I cut in, keeping my voice steady. "Stop. Take Emma to the hospital. Work is not more important than your daughter." She went quiet for a few seconds. "But the probation contract—" "I don't care about the contract right now. Your daughter is sick. Call me after you get to the hospital. I'll handle the office side. I don't know if I have enough money. I don't have good insurance. Which hospital?" "County General." "I'll come." "No, you don't have to." "I'm coming because you shouldn't be sitting there alone while your daughter can't breathe properly." "I'm not coming as your boss." I hung up before she could argue further. On the drive to the hospital, memories I usually kept buried came back sharply. I remembered sitting in an emergency room years ago with my little sister when she had a high fever. I remembered staring at the bill afterward and feeling my stomach drop. Poor people don't just fear getting sick, they fear what comes after. When I arrived, Sarah was in the waiting area holding Emma in her lap. The little girl's face was flushed, her breathing labored, her eyes half closed. Sarah was stroking her hair and whispering, "Mama's here. Mama's here." She looked up when she saw me. Surprise crossed her face, followed quickly by relief, then shame. "You actually came." "What did the doctor say?" "They think it might be pneumonia. They want to admit her, give her antibiotics and oxygen, but I don't know how I'm going to pay for it." I sat down beside her. "I'll cover the hospital bill." Sarah shook her head immediately. "No, I can't let you do that. This is exactly what I was afraid of." I looked at her directly. "Listen to me. I will pay the hospital directly. You will not owe me anything. Not loyalty, not extra hours, not affection, not gratitude, nothing." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. I don't know how to accept something like this without feeling like I'm being tied down. I understand some of it, but this time, don't accept it for yourself. Accept it for Emma. She needs treatment, and she shouldn't have to suffer because the adults around her were hurt before." Sarah held her daughter tighter. I continued, "Richard taught you that kindness is a trap. I don't blame you for believing that. But you also need to know that some people help because it's the right thing to do." She cried quietly. A nurse called Emma's name. Sarah stood up, but before she walked away, she looked at me. "You won't use this to change how you treat me at work, will you?" "I will still expect you to do your job well." She let out a small, broken laugh through her tears. "Okay." Emma was admitted for 3 days. I handled the billing directly with the hospital and made it clear that all medical decisions remained Sarah's. I was only the person paying, nothing more. I brought coffee, sandwiches, and an extra sweater. Sometimes I sat in the hallway for hours without trying to make conversation. I was simply there. On the second night, when Emma was sleeping more comfortably, Sarah came out and sat beside me in the hallway. "You could have just paid and left," she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "I know. Why did you stay?" I looked through the glass at Emma's room. Because when someone is afraid, sometimes presence matters more than money. Sarah didn't answer right away, but she didn't sit as far from me as she used to. On the third morning, Emma's fever broke. She opened her eyes, saw her mother first, then saw me standing in the doorway. "Mr. Marcus is still here?" I smiled. "I'm still here." Emma's voice was small. "You're good like Mama." Sarah started crying immediately. Not because she was sad, because after months of living in suspicion, she had just heard her daughter call a man good without fear. When Emma fell back asleep, Sarah looked at me. "Thank you, not just for the money, for staying and not turning it into chains." I answered, "Thank you for letting me prove that I wouldn't." I didn't say it out loud, but that night I understood something clearly. I no longer saw Sarah as just someone I wanted to help. I had started to care about her in a way that went beyond what an employer should feel for an employee. And because of that, I had to be even more careful. If I ever let my feelings turn into pressure or expectation, I would become a prettier version of Richard. I could never allow that to happen. Emma came home after 3 days in the hospital. Sarah took a few extra days off, then returned to work. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't treat her differently in front of the team. I simply made sure her workload stayed reasonable and that she still had the same expectations and protections as everyone else. But something between us had shifted. Sarah smiled more often. Not all at once, and not brightly at first, but gradually. She started eating lunch with the rest of the team instead of at her desk. She began joking with the receptionist. She even started pushing back on some of my ideas about client scheduling, offering better alternatives instead of simply agreeing with everything I said. I liked it. I liked watching her find her voice again. When the 3-month probation period ended, I signed her permanent contract without hesitation. During the review meeting, I told her, "You're the best administrative assistant I've ever had." Sarah looked at me seriously. "Are you saying that because I do good work or because you feel sorry for me?" I wasn't offended. I knew she needed to ask. I slid her performance review across the desk. "These are the numbers. Error rate in client files dropped 40%, almost no late meetings. Clients have commented on how quickly we respond now. I'm saying it because you do good work." She read the report, then let out a slow breath. "Thank you. You earned it." I saw something in her eyes soften. 6 months after she first walked into my office, Sarah knocked on my door. "Do you have a few minutes? I wanted to ask you something personal." "Of course." She sat down, hands clasped in her lap. "I want to help someone." I was surprised. She continued, "There's another mother at Emma's school. I can see she's struggling. Her daughter's shoes are too small. Her toes are almost curling over the front. I want to buy her daughter new shoes or help in some way. But I'm scared of doing it wrong. I'm scared of making her feel the way I used to feel." I looked at Sarah and saw the full arc of her journey in that question. She hadn't forgotten her pain. She had turned it into understanding. I said, "Start with something small and clear. For example, just a pair of shoes. Not, 'I will save your life.' Just, 'I have an extra pair that's barely used. If your daughter can wear them, that's good.' Or if you want to be more direct, tell her you were once in a difficult place and you'd like to help with one small thing, no strings attached." Sarah nodded slowly. "What if she says no?" "Then respect it. Helping someone doesn't mean forcing them to accept." She gave a small, sad smile. "It's harder than I thought, because helping while still protecting the other person's dignity is delicate work." Sarah looked at me. "I'm learning that from you." I shook my head. "You're learning from your own experience. I'm just trying not to damage it." She stood up to leave but didn't walk out right away. "Emma wants to invite you to dinner." She said she wants to thank you for staying at the hospital. She also wants to show off the new apartment. I hesitated. The new apartment? Sarah smiled. This time it reached her eyes. I signed a lease, 2 bedrooms. It's not big, but it's clean and safe and close to Emma's school. For the first time in 2 years, I have keys to a place no one can suddenly take away from us. I felt something tighten in my throat. I'm really happy for you. So am I. That Saturday evening, I went to Sarah's apartment. I didn't bring anything expensive, just a small potted plant and a loaf of garlic bread, because she said she was making spaghetti. The apartment was modest but warm. There were drawings by Emma on the refrigerator. Yellow curtains hung in the windows. A small vase of cheap flowers sat on the table, arranged carefully. Sarah seemed a little shy when she opened the door. It's not much. I looked around. It's a home. The words made her eyes turn glassy. Emma ran out to show me her new bedroom. I sat on the floor while she proudly explained her purple blanket, her small desk, and the stuffed bear she had placed neatly on her pillow. After dinner, Emma went to watch cartoons in the living room. Sarah and I washed dishes in the small kitchen. She spoke while rinsing a plate. I've managed to save some money. That's good. I want to donate to the community center you support. Not a lot, but it's my money. I don't want to pay you back for the hospital bill because you made it clear that wasn't a debt. But I want to pass it forward. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $500. To me, $500 wasn't a large amount anymore. But for Sarah, it represented weeks of careful saving. Money that could have gone toward new clothes for Emma, or better groceries, or simply more security. I looked at her. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want Emma to grow up understanding that when you have a little extra, you share it. Not because someone owes you, but because there were times when you needed someone to share with you. I couldn't stop myself. I stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. Sarah went stiff for a second. Then she let go. She cried quietly against my shoulder. I said, "You've come a very long way." She answered, "I couldn't have done it without you." I pulled back slightly so I could see her face. Yes, you could have. It might have taken longer, it might have been harder and more painful, but that strength is yours. I only opened a door. Sarah looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Marcus, have you ever been afraid that you're getting too close?" I understood what she was asking. I answered honestly, "Yes, because I'm your boss. Because I have more money than you. Because you were hurt by a man who used his position. I'm afraid that if I say how I feel too soon, it will make you feel pressured." Her eyes trembled. "How do you feel?" I didn't avoid it. I care about you more than a friend, but I won't do anything with those feelings unless you're ready. Your job has nothing to do with this. Emma's safety has nothing to do with this. The hospital bill has nothing to do with this. You don't owe me a nice answer. Sarah was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "I care about you too. But I'm scared." "I know. I don't want to lose my job." "You won't." "I don't want Emma to get pulled into something uncertain." "I understand. I need to go slow." I nodded. "We'll go slow." She looked at me, checking whether I truly meant it. Then she reached out and gently took my hand. It wasn't a big promise. It was just her hand resting in mine in a small kitchen after an ordinary dinner. But to me, it was more trust than any declaration could have been. Marcus and Sarah didn't rush. Over the next 3 months, we kept everything clear. At the office, she remained an employee of Davis Strategic Consulting. I continued to evaluate her work based on performance. To avoid any complications, I transferred direct supervision of Sarah to Megan, our chief operating officer. Sarah agreed with the decision. I wanted her to know that if things between us ever ended, her job would still be safe. Outside of work, we saw each other slowly. We went for coffee. We took Emma to the park. We cooked together at her apartment. We volunteered together at the community center on weekends. Emma started by calling me Mr. Davis. Later, she switched to Marcus. One afternoon, she asked, "Are you Mama's boyfriend?" Sarah nearly choked on her water. I crouched down to Emma's level. "I'm a very close friend of your mom's, and I respect her very much. If one day your mom wants to call me something different, that will be her decision." Emma thought about it for a few seconds. "So you'll still come eat spaghetti?" I smiled. "If your mom invites me." Emma nodded. "Okay then." Sarah looked at me after that conversation, her expression softer than before. She began helping the other mother at Emma's school. She didn't make a big announcement. She started small, a pair of new shoes for the girl, saying Emma had outgrown a pair she barely wore. Then came a few shared dinners. Later, she connected the woman to a job support program at the community center. One evening, Sarah told me, "I understand now. Helping someone isn't about pulling them in the direction you want. It's about standing close enough that if they need to hold a hand, your hand is there." I answered, "George would have liked that." She asked, "Do you still think about him a lot?" "Every day." George had passed away 3 years earlier, but his photograph still sat in the top drawer of my desk. An older man with a round stomach and a white chef's coat, his hand resting on my shoulder from the time when I was thin and exhausted, with dark circles under my eyes. 1 year after the day I first saw Sarah and Emma at Riverside Bistro, we organized a community meal at the support center. It wasn't a big event. There was no press, just long tables, hot soup, bread, salad, and a few simple desserts. Sarah worked at the serving station, her hair tied back, wearing gloves, smiling at each person who came through the line. Emma was in charge of handing out napkins. She took the job very seriously, as if it were the most important task in the world. I stood in the kitchen and watched Sarah from a distance. She was no longer the woman who had quietly walked out of the restaurant because she couldn't afford to stay. She was also no longer the woman who saw every act of kindness as a trap. She was still careful. She still remembered her past, but she no longer let Richard define the rest of her life. At the end of the evening, when most people had gone, Sarah walked over to where I was standing. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking George was right." "About what?" "That the best way to repay kindness is to live decently enough that it doesn't stop with you." Sarah looked at the tables being cleared. "I used to think that needing help meant I was weak." "I used to think that too." "And now?" I looked at her. "Now I think people weren't made to survive alone." Sarah took my hand. "I'm glad you saw us that day." I squeezed her fingers. "I'm glad you came back to the park." A few months later, we got married in a small ceremony at the community center. It wasn't because she needed me. It wasn't because I had saved her. It wasn't because Emma needed a father figure to complete a family. It was because two grown people, each hurt by life in different ways, had learned how to stand beside each other without turning love into a debt. In my vows, I said to Sarah, "I don't promise to fix every problem you have. I promise I won't use love to take away your ability to stand on your own. I promise to open doors when I can, and to respect it when you want to open them yourself." Sarah cried. She said, "I don't promise I'll never be afraid again, but I promise I won't let the fear from my past make decisions for my heart forever." Emma stood beside us holding a small bouquet, crying, even though she probably didn't understand everything. After the ceremony, we left one chair empty at the head table. On that chair was a photograph of George, the man who had opened the first door for me. Without him, I probably wouldn't have recognized the look of hunger in Emma's eyes that day at the restaurant. Without him, I probably would have thought helping only meant giving money. Without him, I probably wouldn't have had the patience to prove to Sarah that real kindness doesn't come with strings. The story ends on a spring evening. I was standing in our kitchen washing dishes after dinner. Sarah was wiping the table. Emma was doing homework in the living room. The smell of spaghetti still lingered in the air. Outside the window, the sunflowers in the backyard swayed gently in the breeze. Sarah walked over and leaned against the counter beside me. "Do you know," she said, "there was a new woman at the center today. She didn't want to take a meal voucher. She kept saying she didn't need it. What did you do? Sarah smiled. I put the voucher on the table and told her she could take it if she wanted, and it was also fine if she didn't. Then I walked away. Did she take it? She did, after about 10 minutes. I smiled. You opened the door. Sarah rested her head against my shoulder, so she could walk through on her own. I looked at the woman standing next to me. The woman who had once been used, who had lost her home, who had been afraid of every kindness, but who had never let her pain kill the gentleness inside her. I used to think I was helping Sarah, but the truth is, she helped me too. She reminded me that kindness is not a single generous moment meant to make you feel good about yourself. Kindness is a responsibility that must be held with respect, boundaries, and patience. I did not save Sarah. I only saw her when she was quietly trying to leave. She was the one who chose to come back. She chose to interview. She chose to work. She chose to trust, little by little. And she chose to turn her pain into light for other people. And that is the most beautiful part. Not a rich man saving a poor woman, but two people who were once shown an open door, now keeping that same door open for whoever comes next.